Hello, welcome to Conversations with Kate. I'm your host, Kate Jagede, and today I am joined by Kevin Fluke. And I really love the theatre of, interwoven the ethnohistoricity of our names. I mean, your name, Kevin, reminds me of sort of beer and good food and the rolling
Yep,
hills of.
yep. It's a
Um,
great Irish name, and my last name Pflug is the German word for plow. So I believe my
oh,
ancestors were farmers. Yeah, but yeah, I'm a Kevin through and through.
I thought it was German. I was saying, I hope
Yeah.
I'm not too wrong about that. So, Kevin, before we launch into the conversation, I'm just going to introduce you to the viewing audience and read my notes here. I haven't committed this to memory, but Kevin is a writer and a lawyer with a strong interest in the occult and the evolution of consciousness, which are certainly topics that we're very interested on this channel. So, having trained as a or having worked, sorry, as a corporate litigator, an environmental advocate, and a personal injury lawyer, Kevin is now in the enviable position of being a stay-at-home dad, which I think is absolutely fantastic. He also occasionally writes a news column for the publication Grit Daily, and I'll put a link to that below. Also, a link to Kevin's writing on Medium, which is excellent. I've read all of your pieces, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
So, Kevin is an avid reader. He's been influenced by a number of authors, among them Henry David Thoreau, Carl Jung, Teilhard de Chardin, Joseph Campbell, Terence McKenna, Marshall McLuhan, and Robert Aston Wilson. In his spare time, when he has some spare time with all that reading, Kevin likes to walk, he likes to practice yoga, and enjoys camping with his family. What a wonderful life. So, Kevin, thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining on
Thank you, Kate.
Conversation. No problem. So, one of the things that I do when I'm reaching out to people and I'm looking for people to have these conversations with, I'm looking for interesting people who live productive lives but aren't the sort of the usual type of people that we would associate with new thought. For example, I wouldn't have used the words personal injury lawyer and metaphysics in the same sentence. So, Kevin, if you could just start by telling me how you became interested in, as you say, the occult and the evolution of consciousness. What was your first foray into these fields?
Well, I think I've always had a sense that there's something more to this world than meets the eye, something beyond the physical world. And I think it's been coupled with sort of a deep sense that there's something not right with our society, sort of how things are structured, how we're organized. And in terms of how I first fell into that, I would say you mentioned Henry David Thoreau, who I was a big fan of when I was young. And he was sort of the first thinker that put the idea into my mind that it's okay to step away from society. If you want to go live in a shack, by a lake in the woods for a couple of years and write about it, you can do that. And not only can you do it, but that might be a virtuous thing to do that will be remembered, and you might have a lot of good ideas come from that. And I found it inspirational, but I largely forgot about it. Went to college, and a little bit of my background. My father grew up relatively poor in Brooklyn, 12 people in a two-bedroom apartment, that kind of thing. And he went to college, got a math degree, and was successful. He was a pension actuary, had a good career. And my goal when I became an adult, I wanted to do the same. I wanted to sort of advance our family. How my father brought our family from lower class to the middle class, I wanted to take the Flugs to the upper class. So rather than go, in a shack by a lake in the woods, I went to law school. Well, first I went to college, I got a degree in finance. Thought I wanted to work on Wall Street. But I noticed a lot of my friends who were smart were not going to work on Wall Street. They were going to law school. I said, I would go to law school. So I did that, and I got a job with a great firm, making a lot of money, doing work that I wanted to do when I was in law school, but I wasn't happy. I was waking up in the morning. I was having trouble getting out of bed in the morning and didn't want to go to my job. So I left, and I became an environmental attorney. But basically, what I'm trying to say is I spent a lot of my life in the material world, and it was not satisfactory. It didn't satisfy me. So I withdrew and experienced tremendous numbers of synchronicities with sort of the ideas I was studying and researching. And I've sort of stayed on that path. But, as a lawyer, you got to be a materialist. You got to be practical. But I walked away from it. And I'd like to say there's sort of one moment that made me do that. And that's not really the case. Sort of a lifetime of suspecting there's something more out there that we haven't quite figured out, but it's sort of right behind everything. And that's where the action is. One of my favorite paintings is The Son of Man by Rene Magritte. It's the man with the bowler hat with the apple in front. And everyone likes that painting. I always did. Never really knew why. And somebody recently explained to me the meaning of that painting. The meaning of that painting is behind the visible lies the invisible. And that's where all the action is. And the apple is such an interesting symbol. I mean, not just Adam and Eve, but also Apple Records. Supposedly the Beatles, they took their name of their record company from that painting, Rene Magritte. And now, in modern day, we all have apples in our pockets. So this era that begun with an apple is now ending with an apple, as I see it. So anyway, that's how I came to where I am now.
That's absolutely fascinating. And people familiar with Thoreau will know that he does invite us to explore these kind of alternative freedoms that are available to us. But what I find interesting about your evolution is the fact that it seemed to have been a sort of come before Thoreau, if you like. I think even though you said that those seeds were planted, it seems to me that there was something there niggling.
Okay. Sure, yeah. So I think we're all hardwired for not to serve, but some sort of religious devotion. And as a child, I was raised in Roman Catholicism. My parents were Catholic. I was Catholic. And as a young adult, I kind of rejected that, which I think most people do. But we're hardwired to serve. And if you don't have some sort of belief system, something beyond, some sort of metaphysical belief system, you're doomed. You're probably going to become an addict. You're probably going to serve things that don't serve you. So it was sort of by the trial of fire, dark night of the soul, that you realize, oh my God, like I have to get back on the path. But yeah, spirituality, it's always there. It's kind of right behind things. My mother was very interested in Edgar Cayce. I remember we went to his house as a child in Virginia Beach, and it was just, maybe in 7 or 8 years old, fascinated by that concept. People would write him letters and he could heal them. He would have dreams that he could heal them. And I say, how is that possible? He was just a crazy man. He had special gifts. Well, I tend to think if someone can do something that you can do anything that anyone else can. So if you see someone doing something that you want to do, rather than saying, oh, that person's crazy, or that's his gift, you can say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So how does he do that? What are the rules that allow him to have all these spiritual gifts? So yeah, the seed was planted young, but our culture, our mainstream culture, there's no room for that kind of thought. And it's almost sort of, get rid of it. You're crazy if you believe that. There's really no room for it. So that's where it is.
That's so interesting. And I love the way that you are able to kind of bring your experiences to bear on where you are now. But you mentioned earlier on about being an attorney, and being an attorney, you have to be materialistic. So how did this awareness that you had, how did that manifest, if at all, in your work as a lawyer? Did you find that the two things were just incongruous with each other? Or were you able to infuse your legal practice with what you believed?
You try, but ultimately I decided that I couldn't do it, and I left practicing the law. And maybe I'll tell you, the last type of law I did was personal injury law, and that's what they're referred to as ambulance chasers. Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, a lot of people don't know this. Personal injury lawyers like the term ambulance chaser because it implies that our clients were actually injured, that they were in the ambulance. The truth of the matter is, about 80–90% of people filing lawsuits in America, at least in New Jersey, after car accidents and slip and falls, things like that, they're faking it. They're not hurt. They want the insurance money. And there's this whole cottage industry of lawyers, doctors, MRI facilities, surgeons, who basically help these people commit insurance fraud. And it's been going on for decades. It's an open secret in the legal community. The judges know about it. The insurance companies know about it. But everyone makes money on it, so it sort of goes on. And the lawyers who are trial lawyers, who take these cases to court, put these people before juries who are totally fine and are able to convince them to pay them millions and millions of dollars, they're magicians. Now, regardless of how you feel of the morals of that, of doing that, of whatever you want to call it, exaggerating injuries to get money, which we call insurance fraud, however you feel about that, the lawyers who do it, and there are many lawyers in America who do and make millions of dollars a year, they're magicians, right? I mean, they're taking lies and making them true, and using smoke and mirrors, they're convincing people of an alternate version of the truth, and it kind of works. So to the extent of how practicing law introduced me to, or how I was able to fuse my interest in metaphysics with the law, I would say not so much. I walked away. It wasn't for me. But did I see aspects of medical physical principles within the practice of law? Oh, for sure, for sure. And you really get an insight into sort of like the dark underbelly of American society. Not so much personal injury law with that last statement, more with corporate defense, which is what I first did. And you kind of you get a little bit of a peek into how the high society works, and people or organizations that have large groups of capital, how they can kind of move things around and manipulate things. And they do that. A lot of that is done through their lawyers. You see how that works. And, it's like the end of The Wizard of Oz when you get to look behind the curtain and it's just like, oh my God, like, what is this? Like, yeah, like what? Like everyone in America wants to be rich. I mean, it's kind of a stereotype. I think, Europeans think, I think David Foster Wallace says, Europeans think America is one big shopping mall and we just want to go run out and buy stuff all the time. Oversimplification, but kind of true, for good or bad. I'm not gonna judge it. But American society at the top is, there's some problems there. And I was privileged that I got to see it. It's a lot of exploitation of the poor. People with intelligence and power taking advantage of people who don't have those things. There's an awful lot of that going on. And you can support yourself very well being a part of that system. You could try to fight it. Call the police, call the FBI, do whatever, bring it down. Or you just kind of walk away, and my choice was to walk away. It'll fall on its own. That which you resist, you make stronger. And I learned that as an environmental advocate as well. After I did corporate law for 3 years, I'll tell you a funny story. The way I decided to stop practicing corporate law, I was in my office. Most of the clients I represented were large corporations. But towards the end of when I worked there, I had one client, it was the CEO of a large drug company. He retired with about $100 million pension plan. In America, you get a salary, you get a pension plan on top of that if you work for a large corporation. If you're an executive, you get a supplemental pension plan, which could be millions of dollars. This guy got a $100 million payment, and he thought the company shortchanged him about $20 million, using incorrect interest rate. So he calls up my boss, says, they owe me $20 million, let's sue him. So my boss looks at the documents. Sure enough, yeah, you got a good case. We can get the 20 million. So we were going to get it without suing, just writing them a letter. And I had to write this letter to the company saying, this guy $20 million. So I'm sitting in my office on a Tuesday night. I'm just like, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing? I was like, pencils down. Now, I don't know. I mean, maybe the guy needs his 20 million. Maybe you do some great work with it. Maybe he's a philanthropist. I have no idea. But it just wasn't. It wasn't for me. I think you have to fuse your metaphysical beliefs, your spiritual beliefs with functioning in the world. Doing it as a lawyer is very difficult. I don't think it can. I'm sure it can be done, but it's very difficult in my opinion.
You know what I really love about what you're saying? This is what I want people to do through the work that I do through these conversations. Is really start to think of the fact that we are living in a real world with all of these sort of issues going on, and I'm actually what you're saying makes me think about your piece, which I'm going to refer to in just a moment. But I want people to get really mature. You use the term magicians, and people do make magic every day. And there is this real underpinning of this metaphysical, I'm going to call it power, just for the sake of this conversation, at work and at play. And it's something that's a part of us. And I want people to start to recognize that. So before you continue, I just want Kevin to now talk about your piece, concepts versus things. I love that piece.
Oh, thank you.
I love this idea that we as a global community have reached consensus on so many things. There are so many concepts that we accept as real. And yet when you put something like there is such a thing as thought causation or such a thing as consciousness forward, people don't want to know. What's your take on why we find those concepts so difficult to accept, and yet the kind of concepts that you allude to in your piece so easy to accept?
The short answer, I think, we have no language to describe them, and we're not taught it as children. So, first impressions are a really big deal. And I have a 7-year-old daughter, and for the most part, her first impressions of magic, metaphysics is through television, right? Like the cartoons, it's all fantasy, magical powers, especially nowadays more so than when I was younger. I think Harry Potter sort of changed children's entertainment. It is all mystical, magical, a lot of occult symbolism. And as children, we learn that magic is fake. You understand? Because we know we live in a magical world. We know, we are conscious. I mean, anyone with their eyes open can see that. But we're not told that. We're told that this is all there is. It's, we're a bunch of atoms stuck together, and this all happened by chance, randomly happened. You're random, I'm random. There's no meaning here, and live a good life, tend your garden, and hope you go to heaven. That's kind of what we tell people when they're children, and the rest of their life they go through life rebelling against that idea, but never really destroying it. That's part of it. I think we don't have the language to describe these phenomena, to answer your question. And it's out there. I mean, authors like you, Mitch Horowitz, who wrote the foreword to your book, he's out there all the time talking about these ideas. I mean, it'll change. Everything changes. But why these ideas are sort of kept hidden, I don't know. But they're coming out now. I mean, the internet. I had a professor in college, we were talking about the internet. He said when a technology is first invented, we tend not to use it right. And I think it could go on for decades, it could go for years, hundreds of years before you figure out how to use a technology right. And I think that's where we are with the internet. I don't think we're quite, we're using it for commerce, right? .com, commerce. But really it's about the spread of ideas. It's sort of like electronic versions of Gutenberg's Bible. And this isn't my idea. I think this is Robert Anton Wilson's idea. But once information moves at the speed of light, which is what we've invented, what should we do with it? Well, the only content that's appropriate for that medium is the light. You understand? Mm-hmm. So now that we're, so the light is spreading on the internet, right? That's what's going on here. So these ideas are spreading. We'll see how far it goes.
So interesting. I want you to do something for me, for my audience. Because I never assume that everybody sees things the way I see them. Perhaps you and I see them.
That's 100% correct assumption. We all live in our own realities. Yeah.
Exactly. So in the bio, in the intro, I used the word occult. You used it again just a moment.
Yeah. What do these terms mean?
What do you mean by occult?
Occult. Okay. I just lost you. Yeah. Okay. No problem. Yeah. So occult.
What do you mean by?
It just means hidden. It's that which is not seen. Going back to Rene Magritte's painting, the Son of Man, behind the visible lies the invisible. It just means that which is hidden, that which is not talked about. That's what I mean by the occult. The fact that it has the root cult in it is interesting because that's culture, cults in general. And one of Terence McKenna's big ideas is culture is not your friend. So this mainstream culture that we live in, you want to don't be wary of it. But to me, the occult means hidden. And the term evolution of consciousness, that's a tricky term because it implies that there's something wrong with consciousness that needs to be evolved. And I wouldn't really agree with that. But it seems like we have all these tools, right? Our minds, the power of consciousness, and we're just sort of realizing those powers, remembering those powers, whatever you want to describe it. The next question is, what should we do with that? So that's what I mean by the evolution of consciousness. What are we going to do with this power that we have? And Chardin, Teilhard de Chardin, he thinks it's going to be something like the second discovery of fire. So that's how big of an invention we're on the cusp of. And it's basic. I think it's using our consciousness, our minds together to create reality. So like using new thought, these techniques, that Neville Goddard writes about. People, what are we using them for? Most people will use them to get rich, right? All these, right? Like use law of attraction, get a boat, get a Maserati, right? Great. Okay, but maybe we should be using it for something else. And what is that? No one, do we have that vision? What kind of world do we want to create? No, we're not really sure yet. But I think most people have come to the conclusion the world we live in now has got some problems.
It's true. We want love, we want shelter, we want food, we want clothing, and also the Maslow's triangle sort of coming to mind. But Kevin, when I'm talking to friends about these sorts of ideas, I like to find out how they feel about what they know now. So you walked away from law. You were an environmental advocate at one point. Knowing what you know, do you think it's possible to bring to bear conscious thought and to do something to make those things better? My view is that the world is not supposed to get better per se, but that it's teaching us something through the way that it is. But how do you feel about the applications, let's say, of things like conscious thought causation and those kinds of concepts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a difficult question. Ask that again, because I'm a little stuck in my mind.
Okay, so let's say, for example, one of the things that I get asked quite frequently when people reach out to me is, if you believe in thought causation, can you do something about the COVID-19 pandemic? Can you wish it away?
Yeah.
For example,
okay. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that, and I've seen this idea expressed as can you stop the civil war in Syria by something you can do in your mind, right? You ask people that question. Most people will say no, right? No, right? Yes, I think so the world exists out there. It's coming at you, but it's also coming from you. So everything we experience in this world, we have a responsibility for. So yeah, I do think we can use the power of our minds to change the world. And I'm very confident about that. For whatever reason, we haven't quite figured out how to do it yet collectively. And yeah, I'm very optimistic. Very optimistic.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm really excited. And I think it's fantastic for us as people who embrace these sort of ideas to kind of set ourselves personal challenges for the way in which we can apply what we know and see what we can come up with. So yeah, I'm on board with that. So another of your pieces that I like, and I'm sorry the title escapes me, it was the story of Narcissus and this idea of missing truths or hidden truths.
Yeah.
I love this. So what sort of truths do you think are missing just from mainstream culture, the sort of things that are robbing us from actually engaging life in a more fulfilling way?
Okay. I think it stems from being less concerned about what is immediately around you and in your direct field of perception, and more concerned about things that are far away from you, that images, ideas, words that you're receiving from the media, internet, television, radio. And getting back to people confusing television with reality, I think the main problem is people confuse the fake world for the real world. And they don't realize that when we read about politics and things like that, it's more entertainment than real. And that confuses people. And when I grew up, we didn't have cell phones. I didn't have a cell phone until I was an adult. So, I think I benefited from being a child in a world where I was kind of on my own to run around and be free. And I think having the phone, the Apple in the pocket all the time is throwing people off. But as you say, there's nothing wrong here. We're just trying to figure things out. It's a lesson that needs to be learned. But yeah, I think, and you speak for me personally, you gotta be in the moment, in your own, what you're experiencing, what you're seeing, what is coming to you, in your life. Not so much what you see on Facebook, what you see on CNN. I mean, yes, it's true. Yes, it's going on. Yes, it might affect you, but collectively and individually, those ideas and concepts occupy our minds maybe a lot more than they should.
Mm-hmm. I certainly agree with that. So I just want to refer to your daughter. She's 7 years old. You see the world in which she's growing up, without going into sort of the details of your relationship with your child. Are you sharing these ideas with her? Do you think this is something that can be and should be, these sorts of ideas should be shared with children? And
Yeah,
what do you think that would be?
100%. Yeah. It's tricky. It's not easy. And you got to realize we're not dealing with certainties, so I don't know for certain what's, the laws of the universe and how magic works, but I know that it's real. I know that it exists. So yeah, and I think that's a big part of being a parent, is sort of giving their belief system to them, and the knowledge that you have, but also saying, hey, I'm not sure. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I think. Here's the evidence. These are the experiences I have that lead me to believe this. But we're in sort of murky waters here. And we, prior to the plague, we were practicing Catholics. Like, we go to church every Sunday. My daughter goes to Catholic school, and she gets the spiritual teachings through the Catholic Church. But you say, well, that's only one approach to it, and you got to figure it out for yourself. But yeah, as I was saying before, we're hardwired for religious devotion, and you totally see that in children. They're grasping for it. They're like yearning for it. They want to know, why are we here? What's going on? How can we make this world a better place?
That's really interesting. One of the things that I say to people about when they talk to me about what I believe. For example, I'm married to someone who is religious in a traditional sense. He is a higher ranking member of his church organization, and he believes in all of that sort of structure. And I don't. And I think sometimes well, how do those two things marry? How do they work? How do they work in your daily life? I would think the Catholic Church
That's a good question.
is fairly strict about a lot.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I don't really like to say this publicly, but I'll say, so if you're a pagan or you have paganistic beliefs, the Catholic Church and the Catholic Mass is fascinating. And I'll say, like, this might be a little politically incorrect, but similar to how sort of Protestantism is sort of watered down Roman Catholicism, a little controversial, but I'll say that. I think Catholicism is watered down paganism. So it's a lot of pagan practices, pagan rituals, the iconography, the symbolism. So if you're sort of someone, a new thought kind of person, or sort of I read a lot of Mitch Horowitz's stuff, his way of thinking. If you have that sort of approach to things, the Catholic Church is amazing. Same goes for Christianity in general. I mean, they basically, it's spiritual cannibalism every Sunday, right? I mean, they eat. I mean, that's what we believe. We believe we're eating the body of another person or of God and drinking his blood. And if you think about it, that's pretty crazy. I mean, like, if aliens were to land, be like, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're eating Jesus and we're drinking his blood. Well, what are you doing? But then if you study these, occult principles, it's a scapegoating ritual of some sort, I think. It's like, give me your negative energy and it'll die with me. I think it's some sort of scapegoating ritual. Ash Wednesday was recently, that's a Norse pagan holiday where they put ashes on the head. Yeah. And it's the Catholic Church is a complex and interesting beast, but it's very interesting. On Ash Wednesday, they read the gospel where Jesus says, don't disfigure your face when you're fasting. Meaning, when you're fasting, don't make a show of it. Just be humble. And then right after they read that, they say, all right, now come up and get your ashes, everyone. Come on. So it's sort of right. And that's how cons have to work. They have to kind of flash the truth a little bit, And so, and with organized religions, I tend to think they're all poisoned wells. You ever hear that analogy? So if you have a well of like the freshest, cleanest, best water there is, you can drink it, and then you drop one little drop of poison in it, whole thing is fucked. That's how I think these organized religions are. There's a lot of truth, a lot of wisdom, but if you have that belief system as this is it, this is it, you're probably a pawn in someone else's game, and it's being used as an instrument of social control. But if you have that in the background, if you have that in your mind, that this is not 100%, truth, correct, but there is some really serious good wisdom in here, Catholic Church is fine.
It's so funny to say that. I've never looked into Catholicism really deeply, but it's interesting. Yeah. The Catholic Bible is my favorite version of the Bible, but I read it as an esotericist. And it's God's favorite version of the Bible. So I really need to sort of take another look at it.
Yeah. They have some tricks. I'll just say that. They have their tricks. They know some stuff.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, and the other thing in terms of how, you say, how can you go to church and also sort of be into occultism? And this is another problem I have with organized religion, or at least Catholicism and Buddhism for that matter. They don't teach paradox. Paradox is really important. So the opposite of a little truth is false. The opposite of a big truth is also true. And that's what's causing a lot of problems. You can't see the other side of the coin and sort of accept it. But so here's a good example. Money is the root of all evil. Money is fantastic. Both statements are true.
Right.
So you have to be able to deal with two opposite truths and go through the world.
Absolutely. This is such a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I'm enjoying talking to you, Kate.
It's what I'm seeking to do with these conversations. Just really expand perspectives and worldview, and just get people thinking about these ideas in ways that transcend, this is what I'm going to use to make myself feel happy today, or this is what I'm going to do to try and magic up the money to pay a bill or whatever it is to fix a relationship. It's actually, there is real world, real life application for all of this sort of thing. So Kevin, what is the most challenging thing you have tackled using the principles of, let's say, thought causation, occultic knowledge, metaphysics? What ways have you applied it in your personal life?
I mean, lately, the easiest way to answer that question is to pay attention to synchronicities. If you want to apply these principles to your life, watch for synchronicities. And by synchronicities, I mean meaningful coincidences. The classic example is someone you haven't thought of in 20 years, you're thinking of them, and then that day they call you, right? There's something like that, things like that. So when you experience synchronicities, that's sort of like God winking at you. So that's how you sort of follow the trail, and if you're where you should be. And in terms of how I apply it to my daily life, I can't give you any. I don't have, a lot of people have like a regimen. They wake up in the morning, practice gratitude for 5 minutes, do yoga, go for a walk. I don't have any routines or any rituals. Maybe that's a bad thing. But I mean, it's so your belief system is sort of like the operating system of a computer. So if you believe that there's something beyond the material world, if that's your operating system, you will go through life, attracting that to you, and you will see the synchronicities. So sort of that's I guess that's how I apply it in my life. I'm always looking for it. And it's not always there. You know what I mean by it? Like sort of those moments when this is it. This is you're living it. The opening quote of your book is like most people that go through life automated, like robots. Yeah. You get out of that, and it's very easy to slip into that, and that's probably by design, right? Mm-hmm. There are probably people at the top who want most people to be robots, sort of. The comedian George Carlin had that idea. The American school system is like, we want people just smart enough to work all the levers and gears of our society, but not smart enough to question whether or not the society is just and should exist in the first place. And that's kind of, that's kind of where we are. So you want to you got to search for it. You got to always keep your eyes open, and when you see those synchronicities, follow it, and good things will come. For example, talking to you, it was very very synchronistic that you contacted me, and I looked at like, oh, Mitch Horowitz wrote the foreword to your book. Well, that's an interesting synchronicity because I was just reading a Mitch Horowitz essay that morning, and then the day you wanted to call me to have this conversation, well, it's a new moon, and it's a significant new moon today. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. She wants to talk on this day. Okay, so I feel like, okay, this is a good conversation. I'll do it. And that's kind of, so that's how I apply it to my life. I follow synchronicities.
Fantastic. Well, Kevin, I think that's a really good place for us to leave it. We've explored a range of ideas, and I just wanted to give people a taste of a different perspective. It's so wonderful hearing from someone like you, someone who's from a professional background, is so well read, because I think people have some preconceived ideas about the sorts of individuals who are interested in this line of work. Yeah. So I would be very, very careful about who I've selected to have these conversations with, because of what I'm actually trying to achieve. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave Kevin's information, everybody, in the description bar. I can't thank you enough, Kevin, for talking to me today.
Oh, my pleasure, Kate. Thank you. I enjoyed this.
On Medium, you're really going to enjoy them. And Kevin, I look forward to what synchronicity has in store for the both of us.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to me. Bye for now.
My pleasure, Kate. Bye-bye.